Captain Lee Daeho stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride and watched the massive Kepler station grow larger on the main screen. The station spun slowly in the darkness of space like a giant wheel made of metal and lights. Thousands of ships moved around it like tiny insects buzzing near a bright lamp. Some were human vessels with their clean white hulls and blue stripes, but most belonged to other species from across the galaxy. Lee Daeho had been commanding Earth ships for 15 years, and he still felt amazed when he saw places like this. Kepler Station was one of the few neutral zones where different species could meet without fear of attack. It floated in empty space between the human colonies and Altarian territory. Trade ships came here to sell goods, and diplomats came here to make deals. The station was huge enough to hold 1 million beings at once. Commander Choi Min-ho walked up beside his captain and pointed at the screen. "Look at all those Altarian ships, sir," he said quietly. "I count at least 30 warships mixed in with their trade vessels." Lee Daeho nodded. The Altarian ships were easy to spot because they looked like giant purple crystals with engines attached. Their hulls gleamed with an inner light that made them beautiful to watch, but Lee Daeho knew they carried enough weapons to destroy planets. The Altarians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and they never let anyone forget it. "They are nervous about something," Lee Daeho said. "You don't bring 30 warships to a peaceful meeting unless you expect trouble." The communications officer called out from her station. "Captain, we are getting a signal from the station. They want us to dock at Bay 7. "Take us in slowly," Lee Daeho ordered. "Keep our shields up and weapons ready, but don't target anything. We are here for peace talks, not a fight." The Soul's Pride moved toward the station with careful grace. Lee Daeho had chosen this ship for the mission because it was fast and well-armed, but not so big that it would scare the other delegates. Earth's newest destroyers were marvels of engineering that could outrun and outfight almost anything in space, but they tried not to show off too much at diplomatic meetings. As they docked, Lee Daeho thought about the woman he was here to protect. Ambassador Kim So-ra was one of Earth's best negotiators, and she had asked for him personally to command her escort ship. They had worked together before during the border disputes with the Centauri Republic, and she trusted him to keep her safe. While she did her job, the talks were supposed to settle who could mine the valuable crystals in the Tau Ceti system. Both humans and Altarians had found rich deposits there, but the system was in disputed space. Instead of fighting over it, they had agreed to meet here and divide the mining rights fairly. At least that was the plan. Lee Daeho left Commander Choi Min-ho in charge of the ship and took a shuttle over to the main station. The docking bay was enormous and filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. He saw the tall, thin Altarians with their pale blue skin and silver eyes walking beside. Short, furry creatures from the Outer Rim colonies. Mechanical beings that looked like walking metal skeletons stood next to plant-like aliens whose bodies swayed as they moved. But it was the Altarians that caught his attention. They moved in tight groups, and their eyes never stopped scanning. The crowd. Their body language screamed tension and suspicion. Lee Daeho had fought enough battles to recognize the signs of people preparing for violence. He found Ambassador Kim So-ra in the human diplomatic suite on level 12. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair who somehow managed to look both kind and dangerous at the same time. When she saw him, she smiled, but he could tell she was worried. "Daeho, thank you for coming," she said as they shook hands. "I know you would rather be exploring the outer systems than babysitting. Diplomats. Protecting Earth's interests is never babysitting," he replied. "Besides, someone needs to watch your back while you work your magic." Kim So-ra laughed, but her expression quickly became serious. "The Altarians are acting strange. Their lead negotiator, Velthar, keeps asking questions about human military capabilities instead of talking about mining rights. It feels like they are more interested in how strong we are than in making a fair deal." Lee Daeho frowned. "Maybe they are just being careful. The Tau Ceti system has enough crystal deposits to power 1,000 fleets. Stakes that high make everyone nervous." Maybe, Kim So-ra said, but she did not sound convinced. Just keep your ship ready to leave quickly if things go wrong. The talks began 2 hours later in a large conference room with windows that looked out at the stars. Lee Dae-ho sat in the back with other military escorts, while the diplomats gathered around a circular table. The Altarian delegation was led by a tall male named Velthar, whose silver eyes seemed to glow in the soft light. He wore robes that sparkled like starlight and spoke in a voice that sounded like music. At first, everything went smoothly. Both sides presented their claims to the Tau Ceti system and discussed ways to divide the mining rights fairly. Kim So-ra was brilliant as always, finding creative solutions that gave both species what they needed most. The Altarians would get the rare blue crystals they used in their technology, while humans would mine the common red crystals that powered their ships. But as the hours passed, Lee Dae-ho noticed that some of the Altarian military officers kept whispering to each other and glancing at the human delegation. Their leader, Velthar, asked more and more questions about human fleet movements and base locations. When Kim So-ra asked why this information was relevant to mining rights, Velthar just smiled and said he was curious about his new neighbors. During a break, Lee Dae-ho pulled Kim So-ra aside. "Something is wrong," he told her quietly. "They are asking too many military questions, and their officers look like they are planning something." Kim So-ra nodded. "I noticed it too. Velthar seems reasonable, but some of his people look at us like we are dangerous animals that need to be put down. Maybe we should cut this short and head home," Lee Dae-ho suggested. "Not yet," Kim So-ra said firmly. "If we can make this deal work, it will prevent a war over Tau Ceti. That system is too valuable for either side to just walk away from." They returned to the talks and slowly worked out the details of a mining agreement. By the end of the day, both sides seemed satisfied with the deal. The Altarians would get exclusive rights to 3 planets, while humans got 4 planets and shared access to the asteroid belt. It was a fair compromise that should have made everyone happy, but as the delegations prepared to leave, Lee Dae-ho saw something that made his blood run cold. One of the younger Altarian officers was holding a small device that glowed with the same purple light as their ships. The officer was pointing it at the human computers and data pads when he thought nobody was looking. Lee Dae-ho moved closer and pretended to study a wall display while watching the Altarian from the corner of his eye. The device was definitely scanning the human equipment and downloading information. This was not just spying, it was preparation for something much worse. He activated his communicator and spoke quietly to Commander Choi Min-ho back on the ship. "Run a full security scan on all our systems right now. Check for any unauthorized signals or data intrusions." Minutes later, Choi Min-ho's voice came back tense with alarm. "Captain, we have a problem. Something has infiltrated our navigation computer. It looks like a virus, but it is unlike anything I have ever seen." Lee Dae-ho felt his heart sink. The Altarians had not just been spying, they had been planting weapons in Earth's systems. Whatever they were planning, it was going to happen soon, and his ship was their first target. He found Kim So-ra and whispered urgently in her ear, "We need to leave now. They have infected our ship with some kind of virus." Kim So-ra's face went pale, but she nodded calmly. "Give me 5 minutes to finish. The signing ceremony. If we run now, it will look like we planned this." Those 5 minutes felt like hours, as Lee Dae-ho watched the Altarian officers and waited for their trap to spring. Finally, the ceremony ended, and both delegations began moving toward their ships. Lee Dae-ho stayed close to Kim So-ra as they hurried through the station corridors back toward the docking bay. They were halfway to their shuttle when the lights went out. The emergency lights cast red shadows through the corridors of Kepler Station as Lee Dae-ho grabbed Ambassador Kim So-ra's arm and pulled her toward the nearest emergency exit. All around them, beings from different species were shouting in confusion. As the station's main power systems flickered and died, the artificial gravity wavered, making everyone stumble as they tried to find safety. Lee Dae-ho's communicator crackled with static as he tried to reach his ship. "Choi Min-ho, respond," he called into the device. "What is happening over there?" The reply came broken and filled with interference. "Captain, the virus is spreading through our entire system. Navigation is down, life support is failing, and the engines are starting to overload. We need to evacuate the ship right now." Kim So-ra looked at Lee Dae-ho with fear in her eyes. "How bad is it?" she asked, as they pushed through the crowd of panicking aliens. "Bad enough," Lee Dae-ho replied grimly. "If that virus reaches our reactor core, the whole ship could explode and take half the station with it." They reached the emergency shuttle bay just as the Soul's Pride began sending out distress signals. Through the transparent walls, Lee Dae-ho could see his beautiful destroyer listing to one side as small explosions flickered along its hull. The virus was not just disabling the ship, it was tearing it apart from the inside. Commander Choi Min-ho's voice came through the communicator, again weaker than before. "Captain, I am ordering all hands to abandon ship. The reactor containment is failing and we have maybe 10 minutes before total system collapse." Lee Dae-ho felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. The Soul's Pride was more than just a ship. It was home to 300 brave men and women who trusted him to keep them safe. Now they were dying because he had failed to protect them from an enemy he should have seen coming. "Get everyone to the escape pods," he ordered. "I am coming to help with the evacuation." "Negative, Captain," Choi Min-ho replied firmly. "Your job is to protect the ambassador. We can handle this ourselves." Before Lee Dae-ho could argue, the connection went dead. He watched helplessly as tiny pods began ejecting from his ship like seeds scattered by the wind. Each pod carried 20 crew members away from the dying destroyer, but he knew that not everyone would make it out in time. Kim So-ra put her hand on his shoulder. "Dae-ho, there is nothing you can do for them now. We need to get word back to Earth about what happened here." She was right, but that did not make it any easier to watch. The Soul's Pride had been his command for 3 years, and Choi Min-ho had been his friend for even longer. They had served together through the Proxima Crisis and the Vegan trade wars, always trusting each other to get the job done. As they boarded an emergency shuttle bound for Earth space, Lee Dae-ho saw the final moments of his ship. The Soul's Pride's reactor finally gave up and exploded in a brilliant flash of white light. The explosion was so bright that the shuttle's windows automatically darkened to protect their eyes. When the light faded, there was nothing left but glowing debris and the fading energy signatures of escape pods. The trip back to Earth took 2 days, during which Lee Dae-ho learned the full scope of the disaster. 47 crew members had died in the explosion, including Commander Choi Min-ho, who had stayed behind to make sure the last escape pod got away safely. The man who had been like a brother to Lee Dae-ho was gone, and all because the Altarians had decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to exist in peace. Dr. Lim Ye-jin met them at Luna, stationed with a full technical team to analyze the virus that had destroyed the Soul's Pride. She was a small, serious woman who had spent her career studying alien psychology and technology. Her report made for grim reading. This virus was specifically designed to target human computer systems, she explained, as they sat in the briefing room overlooking Earth's blue oceans. It uses quantum encryption methods that we have never seen before, and it seems to learn and adapt as it spreads through a network. Whoever created this spent years studying our technology to find its weaknesses. President Yoon Hae-jin listened to the report with a stone face that revealed nothing of his thoughts. He was a former military commander who had led Earth forces during the last major war, and he understood better than most what this attack really meant. When Dr. Lim finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "So they planned this from the beginning," he said finally. "The peace talks were just a cover to get close enough to plant their weapon." Kim So-ra nodded sadly. Velthar seemed genuinely interested in making a deal, but some of his military officers were clearly working their own agenda. They saw the negotiations as a perfect opportunity to test their new weapon against an isolated Earth ship. Fleet Admiral Kang Soo-min entered the room, carrying a datapad filled with intelligence reports. She was a tall, stern woman whose gray hair was pulled back in a tight military bun. Her uniform was covered with ribbons and medals from 30 years of service, but her expression was darker than Lee Dae-ho had ever seen it. "The situation is worse than we thought," she announced. "Our spy satellites have detected massive Altarian fleet movements throughout their territory. They are mobilizing everything they have and moving it toward the border with human space." President Yoon Hae-jin sat up straighter. "How many ships are we talking about?" "At least 50,000 vessels, including their newest dreadnoughts, Admiral," Kang replied. "They have been building up their forces for months while pretending to negotiate with us. The attack on the Soul's Pride was just the opening move." Dr. Lim Ye-jin pulled up a holographic display showing Altarian psychology profiles. "I have been studying their leadership for years, and I can tell you exactly what they are thinking. They believe humans are a young, aggressive species that will eventually threaten their dominance of this galaxy. From their perspective, it is better to eliminate us now while we are still relatively weak." Lee Dae-ho felt anger burning in his chest, like acid. "They have no idea what they are starting to do." "None at all," Dr. Lim replied grimly. "Altarian society has been peaceful for so long that they have forgotten what real war looks like. They think superior numbers will be enough to crush us without understanding what humans do when we are truly threatened." President Yoon Hae-jin called an emergency session of the Galactic Council, hoping that diplomatic pressure might still prevent a full war. Earth's evidence of Altarian treachery was overwhelming, but the Council's response was disappointing. Most member species were too afraid of Altarian military power to take sides, and others secretly agreed that humans were becoming too dangerous for their own good. The Altarian representative to the Council was a different individual than Velthar, but he carried the same arrogant attitude. He stood before the assembled delegates and calmly denied any Altarian involvement in the Soul's Pride incident. According to him, the ship had suffered a mechanical failure that humans were trying to blame on innocent Altarians. "The evidence is fabricated," he declared in his musical voice. "Humans are known for their aggressive nature and their willingness to lie when it serves their purposes. They destroyed their own ship to create an excuse for war." Kim So-ra rose from her seat in the Earth delegation, and her voice cut through the chamber like a laser. "Honored delegates, we have quantum signatures, DNA evidence, and computer logs that prove Altarian involvement beyond any doubt. If you choose to ignore this evidence, you are complicit in their attack on peaceful diplomats." But the Council was too weak and divided to act. They passed a resolution calling for both sides to show restraint, while secretly hoping the problem would solve itself. Earth left the session knowing that they stood alone against an enemy that outnumbered them 30-1. Back on Earth, Fleet Admiral Kang Soo-min presented President Yoon Hae-jin with 3 options for responding to the Altarian threat. The first was to accept their denial and try to rebuild relations through quiet diplomacy. The second was to demand justice through economic sanctions and political pressure. The third option made Lee Dae-ho's blood run cold when he heard it. Article 12 of the Terran Military Code, Admiral Kang explained. Total response authorization for existential threats to human civilization. If we invoke Article 12, every ship in the fleet becomes a weapon, and every resource on Earth becomes part of the war effort. President Yoon Hae-jin was quiet for a long time as he considered the choice before him. Outside the windows of his office, Earth continued its peaceful rotation, unaware that its leaders were deciding between surrender and total war. Finally, he looked up at the assembled military commanders and diplomats. "How long do we have before their fleet reaches our territory?" he asked. 6 weeks, sir, Admiral Kang replied. maybe 7 if they stopped to reinforce some of their forward bases. And how long would it take us to mobilize our entire fleet? Every ship we have could be ready for combat in 2 weeks, sir. President Yoon Hae-jin nodded slowly. Then we use those 2 weeks to try one more time for peace. Send the Altarians a final message through every diplomatic channel we have. Tell them exactly what will happen if they continue on their current course. The message was sent within hours, backed by detailed projections of what human military doctrine called acceptable losses in a total war scenario. Admiral Park Jin-woo stood on the command deck of the Earth battleship Busan's Thunder and watched the final preparations for humanity's response to the Altarian threat. All around him, the greatest military minds of Earth worked with desperate efficiency to coordinate an operation that would either save their species or doom it to extinction. The weight of 50 billion human lives rested on decisions that would be made in the next few hours. Through the massive windows of the command center, Park Jin-woo could see hundreds of Earth ships gathering in formation around the moon. Every vessel in the Terran fleet had answered the call, from destroyers small enough to dock at civilian stations to massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets in half. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, and it was still pitifully small compared to what was coming toward them. Lee Dae-ho entered the command center, wearing the uniform of his new rank. President Yoon Hae-jin had promoted him to admiral after the Seoul's Pride incident and given him command of the Advanced Reconnaissance Force. His new ship, the Seoul's Vengeance, was faster and deadlier than his old destroyer, but he would have traded it all to have Commander Choi, Min-ho, standing beside him again. Status report, Admiral Park Jin-woo requested as Lee Dae-ho approached the central planning table. All stealth ships are in position, sir, Lee Dae-ho replied, consulting his data pad. Admiral Oh Dong-wook's scouts have been monitoring Altarian fleet movements for 2 weeks now, and the intelligence they are gathering is both good news and bad news. Dr. Lim Ye-jin looked up from her alien psychology reports. Tell us the bad news first, she said with a tired smile. The Altarians have 53,000 ships heading toward Earth space, Lee Dae-ho announced. Their main fleet includes over 200 dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying everything in this solar system. They also have support vessels, carrying enough troops to occupy every human world and space station. The mood in the command center grew even more somber as the officers digested this information. Earth's entire fleet numbered fewer than 2,000 ships, and most of those were smaller vessels designed for patrol duty rather than major fleet actions. On paper, the coming battle looked like a massacre waiting to happen. And the good news? Park Jin-woo asked, though. His voice suggested he did not expect much. Lee Dae-ho's expression brightened slightly. The good news is that our enemy is exactly as arrogant and overconfident as Dr. Lim predicted. Their ships are traveling in loose formations with minimal screening forces, and their communication security is almost non-existent. They are not expecting any real resistance from us. Engineer Seo Jae-sung entered the briefing carrying a classified data pad that contained Earth's most closely guarded military secrets. He was a thin, nervous man whose brilliant mind had created weapons that violated half the treaties in known space. Of course, Earth had never signed most of those treaties, which left them free to develop technologies that other species considered too dangerous to exist. The new quantum entanglement weapons are ready for deployment, Seo Jae-sung announced with barely controlled excitement. We can now strike targets across multiple star systems simultaneously without any delay for light-speed communications. The theoretical maximum range is unlimited as long as we have quantum-paired devices at the target location. Admiral Oh Dong-wook materialized on the main screen from his flagship deep in Altarian space. His stealth ships had been operating behind enemy lines for weeks, planting quantum beacons and gathering intelligence about Altarian defenses. He was a small, quiet man who specialized in missions that officially never happened. The quantum beacons are in place at 47 Altarian military installations, he reported. Their security is laughably weak, and they still have not detected our presence in their territory. We can hit every major shipyard fleet base and command center they have whenever you give the order. Park Jin-woo studied the tactical displays, showing Altarian fleet positions and Earth's planned response. The human strategy was simple in concept but incredibly complex in execution. While the Altarians expected to find Earth's fleet defending the home system, humanity's ships would instead strike deep into enemy territory, using speed and surprise to offset their numerical disadvantage. Captain Nam Ji-hoon appeared on another screen from his dreadnought Incheon's Hammer, currently hiding in the asteroid belt beyond Pluto. His ship was one of only 12 human dreadnoughts, but each one carried enough firepower to level continents. More importantly, they were equipped with the new quantum weapons that could reach across the galaxy in an instant. All heavy units are ready for immediate departure, Nam Ji-hoon reported. My engineers estimate we can maintain maximum combat speed for 6 days before requiring resupply. That should be enough time to complete the primary mission objectives. Dr. Lim Ye-jin pulled up psychological profiles of the Altarian leadership on her personal display. I have been studying their command structure, and I believe we can break their will to fight without having to destroy every ship in their fleet. Altarian society has been peaceful for so long that they have no experience with the kind of total warfare humans consider normal. President Yoon Hae-jin entered the command center flanked by his security detail, and the weight of his office seemed to press down on everyone present. He had spent the last week trying every possible diplomatic solution, but the Altarians remained convinced that humanity would surrender rather than face annihilation. They had made a critical error in judgment that was about to cost them everything. Gentlemen and ladies, the president said formally, I have just received the final Altarian demand for our unconditional surrender. They are giving us 12 hours to comply before they begin what they call the pacification of human space. The silence in the command center was broken only by the quiet hum of computers and life support systems. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing a moment that would define the future of human civilization. Either they would emerge from this crisis as a respected power in galactic politics, or they would cease to exist as an independent species. Sir Park Jin-woo said carefully, if we proceed with the current plan, there will be no going back. Once we demonstrate our full military capabilities, every species in the galaxy will view us as either a vital ally or an existential threat. President Yoon Hae-jin nodded gravely. I understand the implications, Admiral, but the Altarians have made it clear that they consider our very existence to be unacceptable. We can surrender our freedom now, or fight for our survival and accept whatever consequences follow. Lee Dae-ho stepped forward. Sir, my crew died because we trusted the Altarians to honor the basic rules of diplomatic immunity. Commander Choi, Min-ho, and 46 other good people are dead because we believed that civilized beings would not attack peaceful negotiators. We cannot let their sacrifice be meaningless. The president looked around the room at the faces of the officers who would lead humanity into its darkest hour. These were the men and women who had volunteered to carry the survival of their species on their shoulders, and he could see the determination burning in their eyes like stars. Very well, President Yoon Hae-jin said quietly. Operation Righteous. Fury is authorized. All fleet commanders will execute their assigned missions with extreme prejudice. The galaxy wanted to see what humans do when we are truly threatened. Now they will learn. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of final preparations as Earth's fleet made ready for the most important battle in human history. Ship crews ran final systems checks while Marines loaded assault shuttles and fighter pilots tested their weapons. One last time. In shipyards across the solar system, workers labored around the clock to complete repairs and upgrades that might make the difference between victory and defeat. Lee Dae-ho returned to his ship and gathered his officers in the briefing room for their final mission update. The Soul's Vengeance was one of Earth's newest destroyers, built using lessons learned from the loss of his previous command. It was faster, stronger, and smarter than any ship he had ever commanded, but he would gladly have traded all its advantages for one more conversation with his old friend. "Our mission is simple," he told his crew. "We will jump into the Altaro system 30 minutes before the main assault begins and eliminate their early warning satellites. Once the path is clear, Admiral, Namji-Hun's heavy units will follow and engage the orbital defense platforms while the quantum weapons take out their shipyards." Lieutenant Bei Suji looked up from her tactical displays with concern written across her young face. "Sir, the Altaro system has over 300 defense satellites, and most of them are armed with weapons that can damage our shields. How are we supposed to eliminate them all with just 6 destroyers?" Lee Daeho smiled grimly. "By doing what humans do best, Lieutenant. We cheat." The final phase of preparation involved something that no other species had ever attempted on such a massive scale. Engineer Seo Sung's teams had spent months installing quantum communicators on every ship in the fleet, allowing them to coordinate their movements across vast distances without the normal delays of light-speed transmission. When the attack began, every human vessel would move with perfect synchronization like parts of a single enormous machine. The Soul's vengeance emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Altaro system like a predator materializing from the shadows. Lee Daeho felt the familiar sensation of his stomach dropping as the ship's gravity systems readjusted to normal space, but there was no time to waste on physical discomfort. Around him, the bridge crew immediately began scanning for threats while the ship's computers analyzed everything in sensor range. "Report," Lee Daeho ordered as the main screen flickered to life, showing the heart of Altarian civilization. Lieutenant Bei Suji worked frantically at her tactical station. Sensors showed 347 defense satellites in high orbit around Altaro's prime, sir. Most are armed with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. I am also detecting 6 orbital defense platforms that could give our main fleet serious trouble. Lee Daeho studied the display showing the massive planet below them. Altaros Prime was beautiful in a cold alien way, with purple oceans and silver continents that gleamed under the light of twin suns. Billions of Altarians lived on that world in crystal cities that rose toward the sky like frozen music. Soon those cities would learn what happened when you underestimated human determination. "Any sign that they have detected our arrival?" he asked. "Negative, sir," the sensor officer replied. "Their scanning equipment is focused outward toward the jump points they expect us to use. They are not looking for ships already inside their system." This was exactly what Earth's intelligence reports had predicted. The Altarians were so confident that humans would defend their home system that they had left their own territory virtually unguarded. It was a mistake that would cost them everything they had built over thousands of years of civilization. "Signal the other destroyers," Lee Daeho ordered. "Begin Phase 1 of the attack." The 6 human ships spread out across the system, moving with deadly precision toward their assigned targets. Each destroyer carried weapons specifically designed to penetrate Altarian shield technology, and their crews had trained for months to execute this mission perfectly. They had 30 minutes to clear the way for the main assault force, and failure was not an option. The Soul's vengeance accelerated toward the largest cluster of defense satellites while its sister ships attacked other orbital installations. Lee Daeho watched the tactical display and felt a cold satisfaction as the first human weapons found their targets. Altarian satellites began exploding in brilliant flashes of light as quantum torpedoes tore through their shields like they were made of paper. "Sir, I am detecting massive energy readings from the planet's surface," Lieutenant Bei Suji announced with alarm in her voice. "It looks like they are powering up some kind of planetary defense weapon." Lee Daeho was not surprised. Intelligence reports had warned that Altaros Prime possessed weapons capable of destroying entire fleets, but the Altarians would need time to bring those weapons online. Time that humanity's plan would not give them. "How long until that weapon is ready to fire?" he asked. 15 minutes, sir, based on the energy buildup patterns." Then we finish our job and get out of here. Lee Dae-ho replied calmly. Target the remaining satellites and prepare for immediate departure once the main fleet arrives. The destruction of Altarian orbital defenses continued with mechanical efficiency as human weapons proved their superiority over alien technology. Each satellite that died removed another obstacle to the devastating assault that was about to begin. Lee Dae-ho felt no satisfaction in the destruction, only a grim determination to complete his mission and protect his people. At exactly 30 minutes after the destroyers had arrived, the rest of Earth's fleet materialized throughout the Altaro system in perfect coordination. Admiral Nam Ji-hun's dreadnought Incheon's Hammer appeared directly above the planet's north pole, while other heavy units took positions around the globe. The sight of so many human warships appearing simultaneously sent shock waves through Altarian command centers. This is Admiral Nam Ji-hun to all Altarian forces, came the broadcast on all communication frequencies. You have attacked peaceful Earth diplomats and murdered 47 innocent people. Surrender immediately or face the consequences of your actions. The Altarian response was swift and predictable. Plasma cannons on the surviving orbital platforms opened fire on the human ships, while the planetary defense weapon began charging for a shot that could vaporize anything in its path. But the aliens had made a critical error in assuming that human technology worked the same way as their own systems. Captain Yu Seong-ho's experimental fighter Ghost of Terra streaked through the chaos of the orbital battle like a silver arrow, fired by an angry god. His ship was barely 20 meters long, but it carried weapons that violated everything the galaxy thought it knew about the laws of physics. When he targeted the Altarian flagship Eternal Glory, the results were spectacular even by human standards. The massive Altarian dreadnought simply ceased to exist as Yu Seong-ho's quantum disruptor weapon tore apart the fundamental forces holding its atoms together. One moment the flagship was broadcasting defiant messages to its fleet, and the next moment there was nothing but an expanding cloud of exotic particles where it had been. Ghost of Terra to all units, Yu Seong-ho reported calmly. Primary target eliminated. Moving to engage orbital platforms. But the real shock was yet to come. Engineer Co. Jae-sung's quantum entanglement weapons activated simultaneously across 47 star systems as Admiral Oh Dong-wook's hidden beacons transmitted. Their deadly signals. Altarian military bases that had existed for centuries vanished in coordinated explosions that happened faster than the speed of light itself. General Ko Un-seo's assault transports materialized in the lower atmosphere of Altaros Prime and began deploying their cargo of Terran Marines. These were not ordinary soldiers, but enhanced warriors wearing powered armor that made them nearly unstoppable in ground combat. Each Marine could fight like a small army, and their mission was to capture key Altarian command centers before organized resistance could form. The assault on the Altarian High Council chambers was led by Lieutenant Colonel Jang Mi-young, whose Special Forces unit had trained specifically for urban warfare in alien environments. Her troops moved through the crystal corridors of the government complex like ghosts dealing death to anyone who tried to resist. Within 2 hours, they had captured the entire Altarian leadership and were broadcasting surrender demands across the galaxy. Lee Dae-ho watched the destruction unfold around him with a mixture of awe and horror. The Soul's vengeance had completed its mission and was now providing fire support for the Marine assault, but he could barely comprehend the scale of what humanity was accomplishing. In less than 4 hours, they had effectively destroyed a civilization that had dominated this part of the galaxy for millennia. Sir Admiral Nam Ji-hun is requesting a status report, his communications officer announced. Tell him that all orbital defenses are neutralized and Marine forces are in control of the planetary government, Lee Dae-ho replied. Resistance is minimal and decreasing rapidly. The truth was that Altarian resistance had collapsed almost immediately once their leadership realized what they were facing. The aliens had expected a conventional fleet battle where superior numbers would eventually triumph over human technology. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that could strike anywhere in the galaxy instantly, and whose individual ships were far more powerful than anything in their arsenal. Dr. Lim Ye-jin's psychological profiles had proven absolutely accurate. Altarian society was so peaceful and comfortable that they had no experience with the kind of total warfare that humans considered normal. When faced with the possibility of complete annihilation, they chose survival over pride and began broadcasting surrender offers within hours of the attack beginning. But President Yoon Hae-jin was not interested in partial surrender. His message to the Altarian High Council was broadcast live across the galaxy so that every species could hear exactly what happened to those who attacked Earth's ships. The president appeared on screens throughout known space wearing his dress, uniform, and speaking in the calm, measured tones of absolute authority. To the Altarian High Council and all who hear this message, he began, your forces attacked peaceful Earth diplomats in violation of every civilized law and custom. You murdered 47 innocent people and then demanded that humanity submit to your authority. You knew that Earth's fleets were not to be tampered with, but you chose to ignore that warning. The broadcast continued with detailed footage of the destruction that human forces had inflicted on Altarian military installations. Entire fleets that had taken decades to build were reduced to scrap metal in minutes, while planetary defense systems that were supposed to be impregnable simply vanished under human assault. The message was clear and unmistakable. This is what happens when you threaten human survival, President Yoon Hae-jin continued. We did not want this war, but you forced it upon us. Now you will live with the consequences of your choices for the rest of your existence as a species. Admiral Nam Ji-hoon's voice came over the fleet communications system as he reported the final tally of Altarian losses. All major military installations in 47 star systems have been destroyed. 6 months after the fall of the Altarian Collective, Admiral Lee Dae-ho stood in the observation deck of the New Earth station orbiting Altaros Prime and watched construction crews from a dozen different species working together to rebuild what the war had destroyed. The sight still amazed him, even after all these weeks of watching former enemies collaborate on projects that would have been impossible before humanity demonstrated the true cost of galactic warfare. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering built using human technology but designed by architects from across the galaxy. Altarian engineers worked alongside Terran technicians, while Centauri traders negotiated supply contracts with vegan merchants. What had once been the most heavily defended system in Altarian space was now becoming the center of a new kind of galactic civilization. Ambassador Park Hyo-jin joined Lee Dae-ho at the observation window carrying a data pad filled with reports from the ongoing peace negotiations. She was Kim So-ra's replacement as Earth's chief diplomatic representative, and she had been working tirelessly to create a stable framework for interspecies relations that would prevent future conflicts like the one that had nearly destroyed 2 civilizations. The final draft of the Galactic Accords is ready for presentation to the Council, she announced with evident satisfaction. After 6 months of negotiations, we finally have something that every species can accept. Lee Dae-ho accepted the data pad and scrolled through the document that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The new accords were built around 3 simple principles that humanity had insisted upon after their victory over the Altarians. No interference with Earth military vessels, no attacks on human civilians, and mandatory arbitration for any disputes involving Terran interests. How are the other species reacting to our demands? He asked. Much better than expected, Park Hyo-jin replied with a slight smile. Amazing how reasonable everyone becomes when they understand the alternative. The alternative was what had happened to the Altarians, whose once mighty civilization was now struggling to rebuild itself under the watchful eyes of Earth peacekeeping forces. Admiral Lee Bo-ra's patrol ships maintained a constant presence throughout. Former Altarian space not as occupiers, but as guarantors that the lessons of the recent war would not be forgotten. Dr. Lim Ye-jin's study of the conflict had become required reading at diplomatic schools throughout the galaxy. Her analysis of why the Altarians had so badly misjudged human capabilities served as a warning to other species who might be tempted to test Earth's resolve. The document was titled The Human Factor in Galactic Politics, and its conclusions were both fascinating and terrifying. Humans are unique among galactic species in that they treat warfare as a science to be perfected rather than a tragedy to be avoided, Dr. Lim had written. This fundamental difference in mindset gives them enormous advantages when conflicts do occur because they have spent centuries studying how to fight more effectively while their enemies have spent the same time trying to avoid fighting at all. Lee Dae-ho had read the study several times, and each reading made him more aware of how different humanity really was from their galactic neighbors. Most species viewed war as an unfortunate interruption of normal life, while humans saw it as the ultimate test of technological and organizational superiority. That difference in perspective had allowed a numerically inferior force to defeat an enemy that should have crushed them easily. Captain Nam Ji-hoon approached the observation deck, fresh from a meeting with the Altarian Reconstruction Committee. His dreadnought Incheon's Hammer was now serving as the flagship for Earth's peacekeeping mission, and he spent most of his time coordinating relief efforts rather than planning military operations. The transition from warrior to peacekeeper had not been easy, but he was adapting to his new role with typical human flexibility. The Altarians have submitted their final request for military rebuilding, Nam Ji-hoon reported. They want permission to construct a defense fleet of 500 ships for system patrol duties. Lee Dae-ho considered this request carefully. The new galactic accords allowed former enemy species to maintain defensive forces, but strictly limited their size and capabilities. 500 ships was a significant number, but it was less than 1% of what the Altarians had possessed before the war. "What kind of ships are they requesting?" he asked. "Light cruisers and patrol boats only," Nam Ji-hoon replied. "No dreadnoughts or heavy assault vessels, and all designs must be approved by Earth engineers. They also agree to allow permanent human inspection teams at all their shipyards." It was a reasonable request that showed how completely the Altarian attitude toward humans had changed. Before the war, they had viewed Earth as a dangerous but manageable threat that could be eliminated through superior numbers and careful planning. Now they understood that humanity possessed technological capabilities that made conventional military thinking obsolete. Director Kim Tae-won entered the observation deck carrying news from the newly established Galactic Peacekeeping Initiative that he commanded from headquarters on Earth. The organization was humanity's answer to the question of how to maintain galactic stability without becoming an occupying force. Rather than ruling other species directly, Earth would serve as the final arbitrator of disputes and the enforcer of last resort when diplomacy failed. "I have good news from the Outer Rim territories," Kim Tae-won announced. "The Vegan Republic and the Centauri Confederation have signed a comprehensive trade agreement using our mediation services. Both sides say they are satisfied with the terms and grateful for Earth's assistance in reaching a fair compromise." This was exactly the kind of success that the new system was designed to achieve. Instead of fighting wars over trade routes and resource rights, different species could bring their disputes to human mediators who had proven their ability to impose solutions when necessary. The threat of what had happened to the Altarians ensured that most conflicts resolved themselves before reaching the point where military intervention became necessary. Engineer Seo Jae-sung joined the group at the observation window, looking pleased with himself despite the early hour. His quantum entanglement weapons had proven to be the decisive factor in humanity's victory, and he was now working on defensive applications of the same technology. The new systems would allow Earth to protect its allies from attack while maintaining the ability to strike back at any aggressor instantly. "The defensive quantum network is ahead of schedule," he reported. Within 2 years, every human colony and allied world will be protected by weapons that can respond to threats faster than light-speed communication. Any species that attacks our friends will face immediate retaliation, regardless of how far away they think they are. Lee Dae-ho nodded approvingly. The Quantum Defense Network represented the next evolution of human military doctrine, combining overwhelming technological superiority with the ability to project force across unlimited distances. It was a capability that no other species possessed or could hope to develop without human assistance. President Yoon Hae-jin appeared on the main communication screen looking older but more confident than he had during the dark days before the war. Behind him, Lee Dae-ho could see the bustling activity of Earth's capital as humanity adapted to its new role as the galaxy's ultimate military power. The transition had not been easy, but most humans seemed to be accepting their responsibilities with characteristic determination. Admiral Lee, I wanted to personally thank you for your service during the reconstruction efforts, the president said, formally. Your work has been instrumental in building the new galactic order and ensuring that the sacrifices made during the war were not in vain. Lee Dae-ho felt a familiar pang of sadness as he thought about Commander Choi Min-ho and the 46 other crew members who had died in the Soul's Pride incident. Their deaths had started the chain of events that led to humanity's emergence as the dominant military power in known space, but he would gladly trade all of Earth's new influence for the chance to see his old friend again. Thank you, sir, he replied, quietly. I hope that the new system will prevent other species from making the same mistakes the Altarians made. So do I, Admiral, President Yoon Hae-jin said grimly. But if they do make those mistakes, they will face the same consequences. Earth will never again allow threats to human survival to develop unchecked. The communication ended, and Lee Dae-ho returned his attention to the construction work visible through the observation window. Former Altarian military bases were being converted into research facilities and trade centers, while new diplomatic complexes rose from the ruins of weapons. Factories. It was a powerful symbol of how completely the galaxy had changed in just 6 months. Admiral Lee Bo-ra contacted the station from her flagship Soul's Pride 2, the newest addition to Earth's patrol fleet. Her ships maintained a constant presence throughout the galaxy, not looking for trouble but making sure that everyone remembered what happened to species that threatened human interests. It was a delicate balance between showing strength and avoiding the appearance of aggressive expansion. Admiral, we have received a request for assistance from the Tau Ceti Mining Consortium, she reported.